All right. Hey, everybody. Happy Merry Christmas season. It's good to see you. You may have seen the announcement, but in case you didn't, Out of the Stillness came out on Kindle last week. And in fact, I'm just going to use the Kindle version myself from now on. You'll see me with my phone because it's a lot easier to carry around than that great big book. And I seem to do a lot of moving around. So I'm using the Kindle version. And today we are going to start, we're in step 4, just temporarily, and then we're going back to step 1. But we're going to start at number 804. So whatever version of the book you have, you can find 804. And of course, I will start by reading 804 out of the 7 Steps to Awakening, which is not on Kindle, and I don't expect it ever will be. So this one, you have to have the book. But it's a thinner book, easier to carry around with me as I move from place to place. So this is what 804 says in the 7 Steps to Awakening. Merely to trust is not enough. You must also desire. Without desire for freedom, of what use is the confidence that you can acquire freedom? Desire and confidence must go together. The stronger your desire, the easier comes the help. And of course, you know, if you've been paying attention to this program, you know that we jump forward because we ran across a few journal entries in step 1 that were about desire. And so I just jumped forward to step 4 so we could look at desire a little more and then go back. So we're kind of looking at desire right now, kind of a little special part of the program. Of course, what we're looking at is true desire. And it seems like it was a couple weeks ago when I was here. But what we saw about the true desire is that the true desire is different than the typical desire of the world. Because the typical desire of the world, you're desiring something you don't have. And so there's a sense of lack in it. And in fact, when I was reading my 7 Steps journal this morning, in step 2, I came across a journal entry that pointed out that, you know, the reason we desire is because we think that desire will make us happy. You know, like if I desire something and then I get it, I will be happy. So we see desire as the path to happiness. But the truth is, if we had no desires, we would be happy because we would be happy with what's here now, right? There'd be no sense of lack. It doesn't mean other things wouldn't necessarily still come. I mean, we all know life and manifestation is change, right? So things come. But if we had no desire, we would be happy right now. And so desire is typically seen as an obstacle to perfect peace. But the one exception, as you know, is the true desire. And the true desire we saw is different. You aren't desiring from a sense of lack. You aren't desiring to get something you don't have. You are desiring by being that or being with that or contemplating that to the best of your ability now. Just like you desire to be with your lover. Hey, Meg, I just saw you in there. I haven't seen you in a while. Just like you desire to be with your lover, right? You desire to be with your lover. And so you be with your lover as much as you can, right? It's the same thing. You desire to be with the truth. And so you be with the truth in whatever way you can, as much as you can. It's that type of desire. It's the desire that causes you to be with it now, rather than trying to get something you don't have, right? So that's the key difference. Even though we're using the same word, it really is completely different. It's not coming from lack. It's just, oh, I want to be with that now. Oh, I want to contemplate this now. Oh, I want to think about this now, right? Just like with a new lover. So with that said, let's go back and look at this quote again, number 804. And let me just see who we're looking at here. Oh, we're looking at, it's Nisargadatta. Merely to trust is not enough. You must also desire. Without desire for freedom, of what use is the confidence that you can acquire freedom? Desire and confidence must go together. The stronger your desire, the easier comes the help. All right, I'm going to comment on that. We'll get and see what I put in my journal a little bit, but I want to comment on that too. As you all know, what I really feel is of the utmost importance to each individual on their own path to awakening is that inner teacher, that inner guidance. And what Nisargadatta is saying is the stronger your desire for truth, for awakening, for however you word your spiritual aspiration, the stronger your desire, the more it invokes that inner teacher. Right? That's what calls the inner teacher forth. And in fact, we kind of have a symbol of that in Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi, of course, as you know, woke up at a very young age, went to Arunachala, sat in constant meditation / samadhi. And when people would come in effect to worship him, because that's the way the Hindus are, it didn't matter what they said, it didn't matter what they did, he did not come out of this. He was not brought into the outer world at all. But one day a man came, it might have been Gunapati, but I'm not sure, because it's been a long time since I've read the book, but it might have been Gunapati, but I could be wrong. So, but someone came along. And this person had a really strong desire to know the truth. And so this person began to ask Ramana Maharshi questions about what practices are most useful for truth realization. And Ramana Maharshi began to speak. You see, in that case, the desire brought out the teacher in the form of an external teacher, a teacher who had been sitting there ignoring everyone for years and years and years, right? And now there's so much desire for truth, Ramana Maharshi even begins to speak, right? So, you know, when I received my calling for NTI, I'm sure you guys have heard this sentence before. Near the end of the calling, you know, it says, love cannot say no to a request for love. And that statement has shown up in my journal repeatedly. Love cannot say no to a request for love. And that's what that's really referring to, is when you have that desire for awakening, the guide to awakening has to show up. It has to. Whether it appears to be an external teacher like Ramana Maharshi showed up for someone, maybe Gunapati, or whether it appears to be just the internal teacher, which is what showed up for me. There was really no external teacher at all. In some form, that teacher is going to show up and answer your questions because your desire is so strong. It could be a book too. It could be a book that shows up, right? And that book has the answers to your questions. So merely to trust is not enough. You must also desire. Without desire for freedom, of what use is the confidence that you can acquire freedom? Desire and confidence must go together. The stronger your desire, the easier comes the help. All right, finally, we'll get to my journal. Now, I apparently spent a lot of time with 804, and heck, I just now spent 11 minutes with it, you know, so apparently it's a quote that really attracts me. Because if you look at Out of the Stillness, you'll notice there's an 804A through 804F, which means I would contemplate it and then contemplate it more and then contemplate it more. So I really spent a lot of time with this quote. Today, we're going to look at 804A, 804E, and 804F. So we're not going to look at all of them. But starting with 804A, I said that I could trust this world because it is an illusion. I can trust an illusion because it is made by desire. If my desire is off, the illusion will be off. If my desire is clear, centered on the purpose of awakening and unwavering, the illusions, gifts, and opportunities will be just as clear and focused. I can always trust the illusion to respond to my desire. Now, what is my desire? This obviously isn't a feeling that I had when I started the spiritual path, or for even many, many years into the spiritual path. By the time I wrote 804A, I'm not sure what year we're in. I'm going to guesstimate 2014 or 2015 by the time I was at this point in the 7 steps. So I had been on the spiritual path for at least 10 years. And as you guys know, my being on the spiritual path has been very, very focused. And so what had happened in that 10 years is I got to a place where I actually, listen to these words, trusted the world. Trusted the world, and the reason that I trusted the world is because I knew that the world was nothing but a manifestation. And I knew that it was a manifestation of desire. And I knew that if my desire was pure and focused, the world could only interact with me in accordance with that desire. And I do have that trust in the world. I have that trust in the world to this day, from whatever time that trust was born until now, it's still here. So it's a matter of really knowing that the world is not real. When you think the world is real, you can't trust it, right? You just can't. But when you know the world is not real and you know how the appearance comes into being, and then you also, if you also know that you are pure and you're desiring, then you know that your relationship with the world is perfect. And the only thing the world can do is give you what is needed to help you awaken. It can't do anything else. A Course in Miracles says, I am not the victim of the world I see. That is so true. And in fact, NTI 1 Corinthians says that we think the world is Lord and that we are a subject, like servant, like a subject. We think the world is Lord and we are subject, but actually that's reversed. Actually, we are the Lord and the world is subject. It's the servant, right? It responds to us. And so by the time I got to 804A, I had developed that realization and that trust so that I knew I can trust the world. I knew that the world is only going to bring me what is helpful to my awakening, that it can't do anything else. And in fact, the other day I was reading A Course in Miracles manual for teachers, and I ran across this, which really surprised me because I didn't remember reading this. Let me see if I can find it. Well, I don't know for sure if I have it here highlighted or not. Let me just start reading and we'll see if we hit it. It's under the Development for Trust section in the Manual for Teachers. I'm talking to trust. It says, this is the foundation on which the teacher of God's ability to fulfill their function rests. So trust is the foundation on which the ability to fulfill your function rests. Perception is the result of learning. In fact, perception is learning because cause and effect are never separated. Oh yeah, here it is. It's right here in the first paragraph. Good. Listen to this sentence. The teachers of God have trust in the world because they have learned it is not governed by the laws the world made up. It is governed by a power that is in them, but not of them. It is this power that keeps all things safe. It is through this power that the teachers of God look on a forgiven world. So I was pretty surprised to see this in the Manual for Teachers. I didn't remember that the teacher of God, gets to this point where they have developed this trust in the world, because again, they no longer see the world as real, and they know how the world is made, and they know where their focus is, right? They know that it's this desire for awakening. And so they know that the world is working with them. It's their companion. The world itself becomes the mighty companion. You talk about mighty companions, the world itself, the whole world is the mighty companion. It continues, when this power has once been experienced, it is impossible to trust one's own petty strength again. Who would attempt to fly with the tiny wings of a sparrow when the mighty power of an eagle has been given him? So, whoops, I forgot. I started to reach for the book out of the stillness. I don't have it. Everything's on the Kindle. I'll become Kindle good pretty soon. I'll be really good at moving around in it. I'm still learning. So 804a, again, Nisargadatta was talking about confidence and desire needing to go together, right? And so 804a says, I said, and I said that earlier in the journal somewhere, I said that I could trust this world because it is an illusion. I can trust an illusion because it is made by desire. If my desire is off, the illusion will be off. If my desire is clear, centered on the purpose of awakening and unwavering, the illusion's gifts and opportunities will be just as clear and focused. I can always trust the illusion to respond to my desire. Now, what is my desire? And it's kind of interesting if you look at that and then you go back and look at Nisargadatta's quote, because, at first Nisargadatta's quote may not have, like confidence isn't enough, right? It may not have really clicked. But when he says merely to trust is not enough, right? You must also have desire, right? Now we understand that desire is where everything in manifestation is coming from. And so if I trust, but my desire is still off, my desire is still for other things, the world isn't working with me to help me awaken. The world is working with me to help me continue my dream, because that's what I want. You see, it's responding to me. So merely to trust is not enough. I've got to put that desire in there, because the desire is the power that creates, right? Desire is the power that creates. So merely to trust is not enough. You must also desire. Without desire for freedom, of what use is the confidence that you can acquire freedom? Desire and confidence must go together. And then listen to this sentence again. The stronger your desire, the easier comes the help. You see how that's coming from your desire? The stronger your desire, the easier comes the help, right? So I'm going to skip over to program. NTI Philippians in the world is a reflection of your faith. What is it you find yourself doing? Why are you doing it? Is that action evidence that your faith is placed with your motive being your spiritual aspiration? Is that action evidence that your faith is placed with your motive? Or are you finding that you have placed your faith elsewhere? And then I wrote, I will watch to see what I discover. Self-honesty and clear seeing without judgment are of the utmost importance if I want to ensure my desire is clear, centered on the purpose of awakening, and unwavering. So what NTI Philippians recognizes is that we can lie to ourselves. I used to say that we are masters of deception. until we're not. Right? we're all masters. We're either masters of deception or we're masters of awakening, meaning that we've shifted over into that process, not necessarily that we're awake yet, but we're either masters of deception or we're masters of awakening. There's no doubt that we're a master. And so what NTI Philippians is saying is that, you know, since we are masters of deception, we need a way to discover if we're lying to ourselves, right? We need a way to discover if we're deceiving ourselves. If we really want awakening, and yet we're masters of deception, we have these huge blind spots that we've created. We're great at lying to ourselves. We need a way to discover where we're lying to ourselves, not so that we will condemn ourselves, not so that we will feel guilty, but so that we can bring ourselves in line with where we want to be, right? You know, we don't want to be thinking we're walking in this direction when we're actually going off in a different direction. So we need something to help us see what we're doing so that we can bring ourselves back in harmony with what we truly want. And NTI Philippians says, the best tool you have to discover where you're lying to yourself is your body. Because that body is demonstrating desire. It's a manifestation just like the whole rest of the world. It is actually acting out your desire, always. And so you can watch to see what the body is doing, watch to see what the mouth is saying, and you could, and you won't be able to lie to yourself if you do this genuinely. So for example, by the way, I'm not yet retired, but I finished the last project I had to do was this Kindle Out of the Stillness, which I finished last week. And then I had a few loose ends to tie up, which I tied up through the end of last week. And I actually started vacation Monday until I retire. So in that way, I'm here. I'm on vacation. And so I've already stepped into living as if I am retired, right? And so one of the things I want to watch as I'm living as if I am retired is, what am I doing with this free time? Right? What am I doing with this free time? Am I spending the time in contemplation and meditation and what other types of practices or reading or watching or listening I may be guided to do? Or am I spending that extra time creating extra work, watching TV, whatever, you know, whatever. How am I spending the time? And I can tell by how I'm spending the time what I'm desiring. You know, so if I desire to have fun, you know, girls just want to have fun. There's all kinds of things I can do, right? There's all kinds of things I can get involved in. There's so many opportunities to get involved. If I want to impress people, maybe I'm getting involved in other things, right? In order to get people to be impressed with me, right? The people pleaser type of person. Maybe I just want to be lazy and I'm laying around like a couch potato, eating potato chips and watching TV. I can assure you that I'm not doing any of that, at least in these first 3 days. I dove right in with the heart. I dove right in with the heart. And, oh, it feels so good I could cry. It is so wonderful. You know, I love you guys. But ever since I was guided to start awakening together, I've been busy. Really busy. And it doesn't mean there wasn't meditation and there wasn't contemplation, because there was. I mean, shoot, all of MPP was written through me contemplating. You know, all of Gentle Healing was written through me contemplating. All of 500 Days was written through me contemplating. I mean, I was contemplating, but it was as if my contemplation was resulting in a product. It is so wonderful. I mean, I haven't been here right where I am right now since 2012, which was that year of silence prior to starting Awakening Together. I haven't been here, just in private solitude, just me and my inner teacher for no reason but my awakening since 2012. That's 10 years ago. It feels so good. It's just, I can't tell you how good it feels. But even that is telling you how pure my desire is, right? Listen to how much I love that I now have this time back, right? It's like, again, it's like I get to be with my lover again. I mean, I was with my lover the last 10 years, but there was another purpose there too, right? Everything I was developing for awakening together. And now that other purpose is gone, and it's just, I'm going to use the word him because I'm a she. It's just me and him again. And it's so nice. And there already is guidance coming, and there already is progress moving. You know, there's already movement just in 3 days. So because of what my body is doing, I know I wasn't lying to myself about retirement, you know, but I have to continue to watch that, right? Do I slowly let the hours get eaten up by this and that? And if so, I want to self-correct. I want to self-correct so that I remain in harmony. This that I feel right here. I think last time we were together, I called it the God feeling, right? You guys remember that? This, what I feel right here, and I feel it big right now. It'll fade if I drift off course. That's how you know you've drifted off course, right? But when you're on course, it's just like, it's like this good feeling vibration that's just, you know, that's telling you you're on, you're doing the right thing, you're going the right way, you're blah, 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 blah. And when that starts to fade and starts to weaken and starts to disappear, that's telling you, ooh, you've veered off course. So that really means we have a couple of different tools if we're paying attention. One is we can watch the body, you know, how much potato chip eating and TV watching is going on. And we can feel for the God feeling. We can feel for how we feel. So, drink of water. (804E). NTI Philippians says, the way you operate in the world is a reflection of your faith. What is it you find yourself doing? Why are you doing it? Is that action evidence that your faith is placed with your motive, again, your spiritual aspiration? Or are you finding that you have placed your faith elsewhere? And again, if you go and read NTI Philippians, you will see that it's really clear that you have to do this without judgment, right? You're not judging what you find. You know, you're going there to learn. Am I deceiving myself? You accept without judgment that we are masters of deception. And you are looking for where you are deceiving yourself so that you can bring yourself back in harmony with what you truly want. I will watch to see what I discover. Self-honesty and clear seeing without judgment are of the utmost importance if I want to ensure my desire is clear, centered on the purpose of awakening and unwavering. All right, so we have one more quote to look at regarding desire, and then we will go back to step one. This is 804F. It's short and sweet. I am grateful for this opportunity to contemplate the step 4 quotes. This opportunity is one of the illusion's gifts, right? I mean, this book the 7 steps to awakening and the way it fell into my hands and the way I was guided to start contemplating it, that's all because the desire was there. It's all because the desire was there. And I don't know, I'll try telling the story about how the 7 steps to awakening fell into my hands. I might get a little wrong because memory is faulty, but the general idea will be right. I had read previously The Most Direct Means to Eternal Bliss and loved it. It set my desire on fire. And in fact, I read that book in early 2008, during that period of time when Laurent rejected me. Remember that story? So it was during that 2 months when that rejection story was right here that I was reading The Most Direct Means to Eternal Bliss for the first time. So that book, and I loved the discipline in it, and I probably really needed the discipline in it at that particular time. I loved, read every sentence 3 times before you go on to the next sentence. I mean, it was so perfect for me. And it really set my desire on fire, which is what eventually burned out the I am bad belief in me. Right, that was the end of the I am bad belief in me. Not that thoughts didn't show up after that, but thoughts and beliefs are entirely different things. Beliefs are way too sticky. Thoughts, you're like, I'm not interested, right? So after that, I don't know when, some years later, I kept seeing this book when I would go into Amazon. It would keep showing up as one of my recommendations, The 7 Steps to Awakening. And I judged the title. I don't know if any of y'all have ever judged the title of that, right? The 7 steps to, yeah, right. Like there's 7 steps to awake. I just totally judged the title. I never bought the book, but I kept noticing it. Then a friend of mine, Cheryl Valentine, brought it up to me. And she said, there's this book I have, The 7 Steps to Awakening. You should read it. I'm like, no, I've seen that book. That sounds corny to me. I'm not interested in that book. She's like, well, I'm just going to send it to you. She did, so it was like forced on me. And I opened it up and I started reading. And immediately I knew this is where I was supposed to be. Immediately I knew this was my teacher. Isn't that amazing? I was probably just a sentence into it in the introduction, and I knew. So this is saying all of that, the way that Amazon kept recommending it for me, the way my friend is like, I'm just going to send it to you, the way the book showed up, all this time, the year I was guided to only spend time with this book, and then all the time I've spent with this book since then, all of this is a part of how the world is working with me to awaken me. You see? It's all a miracle. So 804F, I am grateful for this opportunity to contemplate the step 4 quotes. This opportunity is one of the illusions. Yes. So I must have been feeling that little heart vibration though. I always have, I know I'm in the right place while I'm contemplating that. And that ends our little special study on desire. So what we're going to do now is go back to where we left off in step 1. And that is quote number 150. Oh, Sharon says she remembers when Cheryl bought that book for me. Yeah. God bless Cheryl. All right. So back to quote number 150, and I'm going to the 7 steps to awakening first. The mind abandons everything when the vision of the Supreme is gained. Hence, one should resolutely renounce everything till the Supreme vision is gained. Not till one renounces everything is self-knowledge gained. When all points of view are abandoned, what remains is the self. So when everything else is given up, we have this, one of the false beliefs we have to give up is the belief in sacrifice. I cannot tell you the number of times when I'm teaching and I think the teaching is on fire. I mean, I think, oh my God, this is like, we're teaching Nisargadatta or Ramana Maharshi, and again, the God vibration, the teaching is on fire. And somebody will say something like, yeah, but we don't have to sacrifice what we want. I'm like, man, what do you say to that? We don't have to sacrifice what we want. That sentence is so off. I mean, that thought is a clear, if you hear that coming out of your mouth, then you're desiring in the world. That sentence is pointing right at it. Watch the body, like NTI Philippians says. And if you hear yourself saying, we don't have to sacrifice what we want, you are clearly desiring in the world. First, I'll focus on the word sacrifice. That is only a thought. We do have to let go of everything that isn't the self. It's like NTI Revelation says, your job is to keep moving forward by letting go until there's nothing left to let go of. What do you hear in that sentence? That's everything, right? Everything. You have to let go of everything. But the problem is the idea that that's a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice. If what you want is God or truth or reality or awakening or to be only love or whatever you call it, everything that brings you closer to that is a joy. It's not a sacrifice. The sacrifice is a false idea. One example that I've used many, many times was when I first started the spiritual path, I was the director of a national company. We had offices around the United States. I was the director of a certain department, not the whole company, but a certain department. It was a well-paying job. I loved my job. I felt successful. And I had my eyes on the next position up, which was vice president. And I was, doing the right things to get myself that promotion when that lady finally moved on. And I would say there's a good chance that I would have gotten that promotion. And then the guidance came to give all of that up. Right? Jasmine was in the second best school in the nation. And the guidance came to give all of that up and move to Albemarle, North Carolina. And not or how many of you guys think I sacrificed? I gave up all that money. I gave up all that prestige. I gave up living in one of the most desirable areas of the Boston Metroplex. I gave up Jasmine being in one of the best school systems in the entire country. How many of y'all think I sacrificed? You see? Sacrifice is not true. This is what you got to see. And whatever you're asked to give up, it's the same thing. It's not a sacrifice. Because what you're giving up is keeping you tied down. And as you clip those strings, you soar higher. So the giving up part is true. The sacrifice part is untrue. And eventually we have to give up everything that isn't the self. That there's never a sacrifice. There's only an ascension. So 150 again in the 7 Steps to Awakening said, the mind abandons everything when the vision of the Supreme is gained. Hence, one should resolutely renounce everything till the Supreme vision is gained. Not till one renounces everything. Yes, 3 times we've heard that so far in this quote. Not till one renounces everything is self-knowledge gained. When all points of view are abandoned. Do you hear that about your opinions? When all points of view are abandoned, what remains is the self. So let's see what I wrote in the journal at 150. What shall I live as now? The ego or the self? If I can tell the difference, I shall live as self. Why live like an imposter when true self can be discerned and chosen? Now, one thing I really like about this journal entry is it recognizes that I may not always be clear on the difference between the ego and the self yet. It accepts that. Because it says, if I can tell the difference, I'll choose the self, right? So there may be times when I'm still confused. There may be times when I'm not able to tell the difference, and those are already forgiven. They're forgiven in advance. I'm only committing to living as the self when I can tell the difference. But I am committing to living as the self when I can tell the difference. So if I find myself really peeved about something, really upset about something, and I look at that and I recognize this is clearly ego, then I'm not going to act on that. Instead, I'm going to go to my journal and I'm going to inquire and I'm going to get more clarity around why I'm upset. Because I could tell the difference. So recently, there was something that created a little disturbance in me. You know, I hear people in the sanctuary all the time saying Regina said, and lots of times it's not 100% correct. But there was something that I heard in the sanctuary that was off enough that it was a distortion. And I found myself wanting to correct it. And I knew that this desire to correct it was off. I could feel that. You could feel it in the disturbance. There was no God vibration there. So I went to my journal and I looked at it. And what my journal said, my inner teacher, my clarity, however you want to word that, what my journal said as I wrote was, I am at the point where the only thing I can want is awakening. I can't want anything else. I can't want for someone else to repeat my teaching accurately. I can't even want that. I recently read a book. One of Michael Langford's students recommended it to me. It's a book about Vernon Howard, and it's not that great of a book. So I'm not going to recommend it to y'all. But it's a person who knew Vernon Howard almost his entire life, writing about Vernon Howard from his point of view. And one of the things that was interesting as I was looking at this morning, this was this morning, by the way, I just confessed. One of the things that was interesting was it popped up in my mind, something I read in that book. You see, after Vernon Howard died, his entire organization went wacko. I mean, they went way off from his teachings, way off, not a little off. And, and what about Jesus? When Jesus was speaking, he was probably being misunderstood while it was coming out of his mouth. How many of y'all think that's probably true? If I have a desire to make sure that every time my teaching is repeated, it's repeated correctly, that's going to keep me tied to the world. You see? So what my journal said to me is the only thing I can want is awakening. And that's what this quote says, right? The mind abandons everything. Yeah, Anna's saying St. Francis too. Yeah, I remember I was at a St. Francis monastery. In fact, I was there when I got the guidance to start the retreat house. But I was at the St. Francis monastery one night with somebody. She smoked, this friend. And so I went outside with her at night so she could smoke a cigarette. And you can see up into the monks' room because it's night and there are lights on. They have this huge, probably 65-inch TV. There's football on it. They're sitting back drinking beer, dressed like monks. I'm like, something feels off. Not that there's anything wrong with drinking beer or watching football on a 65-inch TV, but I don't know, it's a monastery. It's just not what I expected to see, I guess, at a monastery, right? It felt a little off. I don't think it's what St. Francis would have expected to see either, right? It's not what he would have expected to see either. So this happens. But again, I can't be concerned about it. And we all know that's been my guidance all along, right? To retire from awakening together. And although I may still be participating, not to watch, right? Not to be, are you guys doing it right? That's been my guidance the whole time. So the mind abandons everything when the vision of the Supreme is gained. The mind abandons everything, even the desire that my teachings. Oh, in fact, that's one thing my journal said. My journal is in the other room where I would read it to you right out of the journal. But my journal said, purity is about here, not there, right? This is where the purity is to be. I'm not to watch and make sure the purity is out there when you repeat what Regina said, right? Purity is here, here. So the mind abandons everything when the vision of the Supreme is gained. Hence, since that's going to be the final step, you might as well start now abandoning everything, is what this says. Hence, one should resolutely renounce everything till the Supreme vision is gained. Not till one renounces everything is self-knowledge gained. When all points of view are abandoned, what remains is the self. Again, 150. What shall I live as now, the ego or the self? If I can tell the difference, I shall live as the self. Okay, so let's take example then of somebody, I can tell between in some way correcting that or letting it go, staying with it's none of my business, and all I want is awakening. And because I can tell the difference, I know which one is ego and I know which one is self, then I know which one to choose, you see? If I was to tell you guys, say, okay, let me just go ahead and tell you now, this is what was said, and this is the way it should be, I would be living as ego. Right? Because I was told in my journal that the only thing I can want now is awakening. I was told in my journal that the purity is here, not there. I was reminded in my journal what happened to Vernon Howard and Jesus. Why should I expect it to be any different here, right? So I know how the self lives. The self lets it be. And so if I can tell the difference between the self and the ego, I'm committed to living the self. Now, I will give you guys a very general hint. Stop asking each other questions. Ask your inner guide. Because that's what happened on a recording. Somebody asked somebody a question and somebody gave an answer that wasn't right. If you just gone to your inner guide, okay? Quit asking each other questions. You're not here to answer each other's questions. That's what your inner guide is for. And that's as far as I'll go on that topic. That feels okay to say. So what shall I live as now? The ego or the self? By the way, when I have a question, where do you think I go with it? So you're following my example if you stop asking other people and you start asking within. What shall I live as now, the ego or the self? If I can tell the difference, I shall live as self. Why live like an imposter when true self can be discerned and chosen? So 152. We get through a lot more quotes when I don't take questions. We might actually finish this book one day. 152, going to the 7 steps to awakening. Just as a lamp utterly dispels darkness, the knowledge of truth completely uproots concepts and conditioning. Just as a lamp utterly dispels darkness, the knowledge of truth completely uproots concepts and conditioning. So 152 in the journal. Just as the father in the story of the prodigal son, George. I always think of George now when I see the words prodigal son, every time, 100% of the time. Just as the father in the story of the prodigal son came to meet the son when the son decided to abandon his old ways and head home. The light of truth shall complete the journey for us when all value is removed from our old ways and placed with our desire for self. This reminds me of the quote that we saw earlier in step 4 by Nisargadatta, which said that trust is not enough, you also need desire. What this is really saying is desire is why you can trust. Because again, desire, when the prodigal son desired to return to his father, he started walking in that direction. But when his father heard that he was coming, he was so overjoyed that he ran out to meet him, and he brought him the rest of the way home. Some versions of the story say he sent a servant. Either way, right? The father ran out to meet him and brought him the rest of the way home. So this is saying that when we desire like the prodigal son did, we aren't just thinking about it. The prodigal son wasn't just thinking about going home. He started walking that way, right? He left his job feeding the pigs. I think that's the job he had, feeding pigs. He left his job feeding the pigs and started walking home. So this says, when he decided to abandon his old ways and head home, his father came out to meet him. And in the same way, the light of truth will complete the journey for us when all value is removed from our old ways, right? When you say he removed all value from his partying ways, partying, in case I didn't say that clearly, right? That lifestyle he had run to had no value for him anymore. And that's why he started home. Well, this is saying when we remove all value from our old ways and place all of our desire with the self, the light will come and help us complete our journey. This is not the first time we've seen this today. We started in step 4 and now we're in step 1 and we've come full circle. So it's our desire that calls the light to us. And it's the light that gives us everything we need to complete the journey. And in the end, as we know, God takes the last step. It reminds me of something Peace Pilgrim said. Peace Pilgrim said, as she, listen to these words very carefully, as she lived up to the highest light she had received, higher and higher light was given. But the key word there was lived. And that's what the prodigal son did. He lived his desire to go home by starting the journey. We live our desire for truth by, if we go back to 150, this is one example. If I can tell the difference between the ego and the self, I'm going to live the self. You know, if I go to my journal and my journal points out that I need to let that go and focus all of my attention on awakening, well, guess what? I can tell the difference. It's right here. And I usually use a blue pen. So blue and white, right? It's right here in blue and white. I can tell the difference. So I'm going to choose the self. I'm going to choose to forget about this. That's walking home. That's living up to my highest light. And then higher and higher light is given. The Father runs out to meet me. The world rearranges itself to give me whatever it is that I need next. And when we saw NTI Philippians earlier, it said something about your faith being placed with your motive. You guys have heard the saying, faith without works is dead. The difference between faith and trust. Trust is just kind of an inner, I trust, an inner confidence. But faith has action behind it. And NTI Philippians was saying, look to find out if your faith is with your motive. In other words, is your action with your spiritual aspiration? That's the question. Is your action with your spiritual aspiration? And what this is saying is, if your action is with your spiritual aspiration, if your faith and your motive are one, then you can trust that everything you need will be given. And this is why we have to do what NTI Philippians says and watch this body. Is my action aligned with my spiritual aspiration? And if not, can I bring it into harmony? Right? So I'll read this one more time, and it's time for us to, time for us to quit, except my page just turned. Okay, here we go. Just as the father in the story of the prodigal son came to meet the son when the son decided to abandon his old ways and head home, the light of truth shall complete the journey for us. When all value is removed from our old ways, this is where the action is changing. When all value is removed from our old ways and placed with our desire for self. If I can tell the difference between self and ego, I'm going to choose the self. And again, forgiveness in advance for when I can't tell the difference, right? Can't be held responsible for what you can't see. But if I can tell the difference, I'm going to choose the self. That's abandoning my old ways and placing my desire with truth. That's faith aligned with motive. All right, guys, we're out of time. I'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye.